Hi, good morning, and welcome back to the European Resilience Initiative Center live podcast. This is the second podcast, and the first one took place like hours ago. It was about Wagner. The second one now, as you can imagine, is also dedicated to Wagner. So I hope you all have got your coffee. I will got mine. And yes, we can discuss what has happened this night and what we know from the development this night was really intense and really interesting. So let me first summarize what has happened until now. We have seen interesting development. We have seen the Wagner columns. It was last time this night, like around midnight. There were questions like, "Have you seen the Wagner column?" And my answer was no, because I have not. But now we clearly see that the Wagner column entered Rostov. We have seen until now gunfight on the streets of Rostov-on-Don. This is an important Russian city in the south of Russia, not far from the border to Ukraine and not far from the war zone. It's about like 100 kilometers to the border between Russia and Ukraine, and about 200 kilometers to the war line, to the front line. And Rostov-on-Don was used all the time since 2014, since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the low-scale invasion back then, compared to what we have now. It was used as a military headquarters for the Russian army, and it is until now the military headquarters of the Russian army, which is fighting in Ukraine. So Wagner units entered Rostov-on-Don. We have seen that the Russian army tried to block the city using water trucks, using another type of heavy equipment. They have not succeeded with that. We saw gunfight. We see now that Wagner units are absolutely comfortable in the city. We see the pictures of the Wagner tanks posted in the streets of Rostov. We see that the Wagner IFVs are freely moving through Rostov, and Wagner mercenaries are walking around Rostov like buying coffee in McDonald's, or it's not McDonald's in Russia anymore. The Russian government has seized it and created a new Russian company, which is called Tasty Full Stop. Well, that is what we know of Rostov. Then there was a development in the air fight, because according to the Russian authorities, and not the authorities, but to the Russian military telegram channels, and to Prigozhin himself, Prigozhin troops have shot down between 3 and 4 Russian helicopters. The smallest confirmed or partly confirmed numbers I have seen, it is like 2 Mil-8 helicopters, they're transport helicopters, and 1 attack helicopter. Is unprecise, unclear what type it was, but an attack helicopter. And then we come further to the city of Voronezh. Like Voronezh is on the halfway between Rostov and Moscow. And in Voronezh, what we see, the Wagner units allegedly took control over over some military facilities around Voronezh. So what we also see now, we see that Prigozhin, just a moment. We see that Prigozhin has met military commanders in Rostov-on-Don, General Yevkurov and General Alexeyev, and he was sitting there like as a boss. And Yevkurov humbly asked him to to pull his troops out of the facility, but Prigozhin, who was sitting in the center, and his body language was telling us like, I'm a boss here and I decide what to do. He very rapidly interrupted Yevkurov, telling him, no, this will never happen. This will never happen. So now what we have more, we have Vladimir Putin, who is about to address the nation, and he who already addressed it. Sorry, who already addressed the nation. Like it happened shortly, and there is like a live stream of Vladimir Putin, and I will translate more or less literally the Putin speech. Putin plays like that is really funny because Putin plays once again a hobby historian. We know that he always like loved to create some parallels between nowadays and back then, and now he compares the situation in Rostov-on-Don with the events of the World War One, when, as we remember, the Russian Tsarist Empire has fallen after years of not very successful fighting against the Axis, against not the Axis, of course, against the German Reich and the other allies of the German Empire. So Putin said literally, the actions which crack our unity is a betrayal of our people, of our military comrades who are fighting in the front. It is a step in the back of our country and of our nation. It is funny that Putin uses wording "stab in the back" because, like, stabbing in the back was a typical and in context of World War One, because the stabbing in the back is exactly what the Nazis in Germany used as the wording for telling people the story of how Germany was winning World War One, but then communists and Jews have stabbed the glorious German army Reichswehr in the back, and like Germany lost the war. So Putin, when Putin now pulls this parallels with World War One, and says like what Wagner is doing is exactly what happened during World War One, and it is stabbing in the back. He clearly uses Nazi language, like Nazi rhetoric, real Nazis, like from 1930s. Mm. We also know that in Moscow all public events have been cancelled, which is like a pretty strong thing. We know that the flight, which is associated with Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko, his private jet, okay, his state-owned jet, but which he uses as his private jet, has left Minsk yesterday and was heading to Russian airspace and entered Russian airspace. But this morning, we know that the jet landed in Turkey, which is clever from Lukashenko, because like the place in Moscow can be not so safe anymore. And what we know more, like in Moscow, they have IFVs on the streets, and they have proclaimed anti-terrorist legal framework in Moscow. So this looks as a real coup, and not like as some PR or psyop action. I stress, as I said yesterday, I'm not very sure that Prigozhin is the person beyond the coup, that he's acting on his own. I can easily imagine that Prigozhin is acting on behalf of like some allies. And here are the news from the Kommersant newspaper. Kommersant is a Russian newspaper which was counted for a longer time as a serious one. They loved to promote themselves, like, and to present themselves as a serious, independent newspaper, which they stopped to be years ago, but they still address like a more educated audience, and that is why it's interesting what they are reporting. Like, their main news now is Putin called Prigozhin actions a mutiny and backstabbing. It's interesting that today in the night, Vladimir Putin has gratulated Russian youth with International Youth Day. So that was looking absolutely weird. Like, do you have a mutiny in your country, and your best buddy and former cook is announcing that he's moving his troops to Moscow, and you're gratulating the youth with International Youth Day. It was absolutely Ceausescu moment. If you remember, as Ceausescu was holding his speech in Bucharest, in front of the crowd, and was sure that everything is under control, and he was addressing the crowd with typical bureaucratic communist silly words, but the crowd was already ready to attack him, and then gunshots were fired, and it ended for Ceausescu and his wife pretty soon back then. So this had like a pretty strong feeling of Ceausescu's speech, this speech or this announcement of Vladimir Putin to congratulate the youth with International Youth Day. So now we have Putin clearly speaks about mutiny in Moscow, Voronezh, and Moscow region, Voronezh region, and the city Moscow. They have announced anti-terrorist legal framework. The Russian banks rapidly increased exchange rate, currency exchange rates, and they're actually absolutely different compared to official one. Because I will write in the chat, because it's pretty hard to identify numbers when people speak. So I will post the exchange rates for Russian ruble against dollar, and against US dollar, and against euro. And they are like now officials. The official rates are 84 Russian ruble for one US dollar. I'm sorry, like, it's a pretty clumsy morning for me. You can imagine, like, I have slept not that much as all of us, and it is 91 ruble for 1 euro. They are official. So now you get the effective rates. For example, at Austria-owned Raiffeisen Bank, it is 97.55 for US American dollar, and 106 and 4. Yeah, so you see the difference is amazing. Like, it is about like 20% effective difference. And that says that the banks are really nervous, and they don't know what is happening. Last time the same happened, it was the first days after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as the banks didn't know what is happening. Will the West sanction Russia harsh? And we saw the exchange rates clearly over 100 ruble for one US dollar, or for 1 euro. So now it is not yet the same, but the day is young, as the Germans say. So what we see here, um, the Russian authorities act really weak. What we see now, they constantly publish calls for the Wagner Group soldiers, asking them to stay in the barracks, to return to their camps, and don't follow don't follow the orders by Prigozhin. Yes, here like we have the full text, like the Kremlin webpage has published a full text of Vladimir Putin. I will post a link here if you want to read what. Thank you for this comment, Art Vandale. I'm sorry for surely mispronouncing your surname. Is commenting that Russian stock market will likely be suspended before trading starts Monday. Yes, I think so. I think so. They normally take these precaution measures. You may read the text of Putin's speech using some automatic translation system. Um, but here, like I will translate in this live the key points of Putin's speech. So he addresses the soldiers who are he addresses the soldiers who are the soldiers of the army, and he addresses the Wagner soldiers. And he says that he stresses the heroism of the soldiers who are fighting in Ukraine, and addresses Wagner units who, I quote, who have been lied or threatened, and with lies and threats they were involved in a criminal crazy idea, and were pushed onto the way of severe crime, armed mutiny. Then I quote, because this is really hard language that is need to be translated literally. Russia is fighting the most severe fight for its future, and repels aggression of the neo Nazis and their lords. Uh, Virtually the whole military, economically, and information machine of the West is targeted against us. We are fighting for life and safety of our people, for our sovereignty and independence, for the right to be and remain Russia, a state with 1,000 years history. Well, this 1,000-year Reich, I have heard it once in another country. But here, like, it is interesting because, like, Putin clearly moves this whole story into existential fight for existence of the Russian people. Like he doesn't address like Prigozhin himself or Wagner. He addresses the people whose lives are being endangered, which is of course like bullshit. Some Russian lives, of course, can be endangered by this mutiny, but there is like absolutely no threat for the lives of all the Russians, etc. Then Putin says further, this battle is decisive for the destiny of our people. It demands from us unity of all power, unity, consolidation, and responsibility. When we need to reject everything what makes us weak, every disputes which can be used and are being used by our foreign enemies to undermine us from within. And then he comes to this World War One comparison. He says that is why any action which cracks our unity, this is a betrayal of the people, of the military comrades who are fighting on the front. This is a backstep for our country and for our nation. Exactly this backstep. Wow, he's going like full. He goes full Adolf Hitler in this rhetoric, because he's saying exactly this backstabbing was done against Russia in 1917 when the country was fighting in World War One. The victory was stolen. That is 100% Nazi speak. I'm really amazed like how he literally copy pastes what the Nazis were saying all the time in 1920s before they came to power in 1933. The victory was stolen. Uh, Intrigues intrigues, conflicts, and little political interests behind the back of the army and the nation turned into the greatest shake, destruction of the army, and dissolution of the state, losing of huge territories, and as the end tragedy of the civil war. The Russians killed the Russians, brothers killed the brothers. And he, I don't know, like, but it sounds to me like he, exactly as Adolf Hitler back then, that he means the Jews, which is pretty typical for such weird delusional speeches, because he says the Russians killed the Russians, brothers killed brothers, and the greedy profit was extorted by somehow political aventurists and foreign interest groups who divided the countries and torn it apart. For me, like, I would say, if I put it in the context of this First World War One, backstabbing, etc., I would say, like, he's clearly he's clearly pointing at the Jews. In this tradition of this chauvinist, imperialist anti-Semitism. We will not let this to repeat. We will protect our nation and our statehood from any threats, also from internal betrayal. And what we are fighting now is exactly betrayal. The unlimited ambitions and personal interests led to betrayal. Betrayal of a country, of a nation, and of the idea for which side by side units and subunits were fighting, and fighters of PMC Wagner died. And okay, like, then it is the typical bullshit about Solidar and Bakhmut, which he calls Artyomovsk, of course. Then he once again says that it is Smuta. Okay, this is another Putin's historical exercise. He goes one step further into the past. Mm. And Smuta, or literally murky time, is the historical name for the Russian history or Moscow history in early 1600, like 1605, 1613, when the Rurik dynasty ended, which ruled this territory. It was not Russia back then; it was like conglomerate of different nations. And like mostly the Ruriks, they started in Kiev, in old Kiev, in old Kiev kingdom. And then the last Rurik who really ruled already in Moscow, it was Ivan the Terrible, and he killed his elder son, and his younger son Fyodor died pretty fast, and the youngest son Dmitry was killed. So the dynasty ended, and the regent was for some shorter time Boris Godunov, but it was pretty short. And then, like, this smooth and murky time started because there was no legal dynasty, and it was also a part of 30 Years' War in Europe, with like foreign invasion, and some people who proclaimed themselves to be legitimate kings and the tsars. So it was not clear who is the boss, who is in charge, who has the power, who's a legitimate leader, etc. So it ended, according to official Russian history. And now, like, I repeat more or less the official Russian narrative, that this murky time ended. Oh, thank you. Interregnum. Um, that this murky time ended in 1613 with the election of the first Romanov, Mikhail Romanov, who was pretty young, and the aristocracy believed that he can be easily controlled. They were wrong, of course. So the new dynasty of Romanovs was founded, and that was the end of this murky, smoother time. And here Vladimir Putin compares the Prigozhin mutiny with Smuta. So he goes back from World War One into early 1600, and this is actually for Vladimir Putin a very important parallel, because we know that in the smoother time there was a rivalry between the Muscovy and the Rzeczpospolita, like nowadays Poland. Back then it was like the union of Polish, Lithuania, and partly Ukraine. And the day when the Polish troops were defeated in Moscow and were pushed from Moscow in 1613 was proclaimed about 10 years ago in Russia as 15 years ago as a national holiday. So they developed this holiday, the 4th of November, and called it So the Day of National Unity the Day of National Unity was, according to Putin, an event of 400 years ago when the Poles were defeated. So for Putin, the defeat of Poland is an extremely important thing. Okay, so then I think we may finish with Vladimir Putin's speech, because he says that he will punish everyone who betrayed the country, and those who are being fooled. He urged to stop fighting and save and defend everything what is valuable for us and holy for us, and together with our motherland we will overcome any challenge, and we will go out being stronger. I would say this is a speech of a desperate man, because if the Prigozhin mutiny is not staged by Putin, which I don't believe, because it's too complicated and too massive, and you don't stage the event of that scale. This is a speech of a desperate man, because like when you need to address your former cook and call him a threat to existence of your state, of your nation, and of your country, you are really in a problematic situation. So now I will go back to the questions. um Michael Weiss is saying Wagner is a cult. Define a cult. Like, for some sort, yes, it's a leader-focused hierarchical system with personal loyalty to Evgeny Prigozhin. Like, Evgeny Prigozhin has clearly built his personal cult, his personal dictatorship, and that is how he recruited soldiers in the prisons. He came to prisons and offered soldiers to be personally loyal to him. He said, "You fight for me, you fight good, I will reward you. You betray me, you try not to fight, I will kill you." That was like really very feudal approach to the soldiers, or to the future soldiers to recruit. And Prigozhin constructed the myth of him being an extremely honest and fair warlord, military leader, by posing on the front, by visiting his soldiers on the front line, or pretending that he's visiting them on the front line. Much more successful than Vladimir Putin. So Prigozhin was wearing heavy gear, helmet, personal armor, machine gun, like posing with fighting troops. He mocked the military. He used all the ways, like, to present himself as a real hard guy, like a real boss who is in charge and who knows how to kill and how to reward. And that was the difference between him and Putin, because Putin is a person. Actually, like, Putin used all the time the same tricks. He also pretended that he is a person from the nation, from like, he's a very common guy, that he uses this language, this all the wordings, which made translators crazy, because you don't know how to translate it, because like it is not even bad language. It is like a speech of a mobster, of a criminal. Try to translate like soprano clan in life from English to, I don't know, like to Polish, or to Spanish. You will not manage it, because like you don't have these analogies in your mind. So that was how Putin spoke. to the Russians. But Putin did it during the peacetime, or during the time when Russia controlled the battlefield. He could wear like his suits, he can, or at least like sweatshirts, like he could go to and meet people, but he never appeared in the front line because it was too simple for him. But now times are changing, and there are cracks inside of the Russian society. The Ukrainian sabotage groups appear in Belgrade. They seize the government facilities and buildings in the Russian sovereign territory. So now Vladimir Putin, with his like cold approach of a person in a suit, or a top in some like civil clothes, is too weak, and Prigozhin is playing Putin card, but on the next level. And on this level, Prigozhin looks better than Putin. Um, Something like that. Okay. Test somebody pending for this. Is this a part of Ukrainian counteroffensive? Well, everything is a part of Ukrainian counteroffensive now, volens nolens, like if it want or not. Like effectively, this mutiny is timely coordinated with the counteroffensive, and therefore it will be used by the Ukrainian army. I had today a talk with my friends in Kiev who asked me, is it good for us or not? Because we have a bad feeling about that. It doesn't look good. I told them like until now, like it looks murky, but anything what weakens the Russians is effectively good for the Ukrainians. I do not see how Russian army can get stronger out of this situation. Like then we have like two options. The first option is that this Prigozhin mutiny, or alleged mutiny, is an independent event, which is, of course, indirectly connected with the Ukrainian offensive, with the losses of the Russian army, with lack of chances for the Russian army, with Wagner soldiers who are dying, but is not triggered somehow proactively by the Ukrainians. In this case, the Ukrainians will just use it, and are already using it in psyops and in military operation to prevail against the Russian troops. The second option is if this Wagner mutiny was organized somehow, or by the Ukrainians, or the Ukrainians helped them to come to this conclusion. I do not exclude it completely, because first, the Ukrainian military intelligence is extremely skilled, and they they have produced like really crazy, totally amazing operations during this war. So I do not exclude that they could help Prigozhin to come to this conclusion, or to encourage him to do it. And then there was also a pretty weird idea of that Prigozhin's mutiny was staged by the Russians themselves, to find a way to pull the troops back from Zaporizhia and Kherson regions to Russia, with a pretext like, oh, we would have gladly stayed in Ukraine, but we have job to be done at home in Mother Russia. So we now like pull our fighting troops from the front line back to Russia, because Russia is more important than these newly acquired regions. So our mighty army is now coming back to Russia. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. That looks like to be too sophisticated, too clever. And if the Russians would need to pull back their troops from Kherson and Zaporizhia, because they understood that they cannot hold the defense line, they would not need to stage that massive, full-scale mutiny. They would have find something else as the excuse, I would say, because in Russia you have a total control of the informational space, over television, mostly over internet. You can literally sell your people whatever you want, and you will not be questioned for that, or challenged for that. Um, are the Wagner fighters legitimately better? It depends what Wagner fighters you mean. Because since longer time there is no homogeneous Wagner group anymore. If you asked me 2 years ago if Wagner fighters are better than the Russian army, I would have answered you that the Wagner fighters are better than the Russian army on the field of heavy infantry. That had a pretty good reason. First, the Wagnerites back then, like 2 years ago, they were mostly recruited from from the group of retired Russian soldiers who had experience of being a member of Russian elite troops. Okay, Russian elite troops sounds already funny after all we saw with the development with the Russian army. But anyway, you have shitty Russian troops and you have not so shitty Russian troops. And Wagnerites were recruited from airborne troops, from the Marine, and from the GRU Spetsnaz. Pretty seldom from other military units, but still you had to demonstrate your clear record, your skills, your experience of participating in real fightings, and you needed to be really a good fighter to join Wagner. And as I said yesterday in the previous live, the contact numbers and contact addresses of the Wagner recruiters, they were kept hidden or semi-hidden. Like there was no web page where you can Google and say, okay, I will send my email to this email address, or I will call this mobile phone number, and I say, hi, I'm Alexei, I want to join the Wagner group. No, it wasn't possible. You needed to be recommended. You needed to know the people because they were so desired by so many people that they could not digest them all. So they chose to select people by themselves. And Wagner Group was a group with a lot of military training. After that, with a lot of military experience, they had the experience in Syria. They had the experience also in Ukraine, and of course they lost the real fight against the real army. Like, remember how a Wagner battalion, I think a battalion by Wagner, was completely wiped out by the U.S. Air Force in Syria as the Wagnerites tried to get control over, I think it was an oil refinery, and this oil refinery was guarded by some American units, and they have just called air support, and then a gunship AC 130 arrived in the air, and there was no Wagner group anymore in that location. It was pretty easy and pretty clear. So back then they were very good heavy infantry, but of course not a fighting army. Now they're different. They suffered heavy losses during the first months of the full-scale invasion. They had to inflate their number to recruit inmates, and inmates were of terrible quality. Often, well, not all of them were of terrible quality. Like some of them were fighting willing persons in a good body shape, but most of them were of terrible quality. They had to recruit ill person, like person with tuberculosis, persons with hepatitis, uncured hepatitis, and other illnesses. And yes, like you can come to idea, I recruit criminals because they love risk, and they are adventurous, and they know how to kill. But the criminals, they have also one thing in common: they don't love discipline. They can be a good single fighting units or even in groups, but you cannot build an army out of the criminals, because in army you also need some discipline and some loyalty, and that is not what the criminals demonstrate. They can be loyal to their mafia family, but not to something bigger. So now the Wagner groups, if you exclude this old core of Wagner, which mostly doesn't exist anymore, they are not so good. They are not so good as they used to be, and they have very different quality. The still the quality of manpower is not, from my perspective, is not the most important thing in this equation. I would say that access to military equipment, shells, guns, tanks, IFVs, is important here, because Wagner Group was totally dependent on what the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation supplied to them. And the biggest conflict between Prigozhin and Shoigu was about how much of this equipment does Wagner get. And according to Prigozhin, Shoigu sabotaged Shoigu and Gerasimov, the head of the military, of the General Chief of Staff, have sabotaged the Wagner Group and deprived them of sufficient amount of the ammunition. That's why all these videos appeared by Prigozhin as he's shouting in the camera, Shoigu, где боеприпасы? Like, Shoigu, where are the shells? Where is ammunition? And that could be like the main factor to drain Wagner, because an army unit without ammunition, without fuel, without spare parts cannot fight anymore. And now what we see when Wagner groups are seizing control over a city of Rostov with hundreds of thousands of population, when Wagner group are seizing control of the military facilities around of Voronezh, when the Wagner group, yeah, that is also very important. The Wagner group took control of a Millerovo airfield in Rostov region, and this is a very important military air force hub. Like, it's actually like an airport, and the Wagner groups like took control of it. So now we need to ask a question: um, how much how much coordination took place between the Wagner groups and the army, which was protecting these military facilities before the Wagner group took control over these units. Like, if we imagine if it were like the Ukrainian army which crossed the border, would it mean that the Ukrainians would have taken the Russian main, the most important air hub in the region without any problem, without like several minutes? I don't know, but it looked that there was like no resistance provided there. And does it mean that Prigozhin was supported by some commanders of the Russian army? What we see, how he communicated with Yevkurov and with Alexeyev this morning, sounds like they have accepted his primacy, or at least like allied with him. Or was it like the low rank commanders who didn't want to fight the Wagnerites because the low rank commanders respect Prigozhin and see a good commander in him, like better commanding qualities compared to what the Russian generals demonstrate, like a real man for his people who visits them on the front line, who fights side by side with them, who cares about like their lives, who punishes the cowards, but who rewards the brave ones. I don't know. Okay, so there come jokes in the chat that the Putin speech was written by ChatGPT. I cannot exclude that. Um, will Putin need to pull troops out of Ukraine to defend Russia? This will obviously help Ukraine. That is exactly that idea, the theory which I mentioned earlier, explaining that the Wagner mutiny, Prigozhin mutiny, could be some sort of a staged coup to provide Putin with an excuse to pull troops out of Ukraine to practically save his face. I think it's too complicated. Like, I think it's too complicated because any argument that this coup can be staged comes to an immediate conclusion that Putin is ready to demonstrate his weakness, because fighting his former coup, fighting like the rebelled inmates, and telling that the whole country can collapse because one former cook went crazy, and like a bunch of former inmates went rogue and attacked the military. It raises question: how strong is your military? How strong is your country? And that is something what I would avoid being Vladimir Putin, because it is safer to be seen as brutal and stupid than as weak. And Russians never forgive weak. No, never forgive weakness to their lords. Can Wagner Group ever win hearts and minds of Russians? I think so. I think so. The Wagnerites, we know that the Wagnerites, they try to build their image of oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, short answer, yes. They try to build the image as a like real people, honest people, brutal but honest, extremely brutal but extremely honest. And I think this resonates in hearts and minds of many Russians who have nothing against violence and brutality, but want things to be done like straight way. So the Russian media say that a column of the Wagnerites is moving to Moscow and already bypassed Voronezh without entering the city. I highly recommend you to visit to follow this guy. Um, his reports on the current he posts very interesting reports, and he clearly is reporting perfectly on what is going on um, in around this Wagnerite mutiny, and the Telegram channels of Wagner are currently reporting that Prigozhin should be the new president, which is actually nothing new, because this comparison of Prigozhin with the new president is not new. We have seen advertising by Prigozhin. He never acknowledged it officially, but for example, you can see this type of posters which were spreading through internet and were even seen in the streets, like as posters. You can see here. Yes, you can see here this link. So Yevgeny Prigozhin might uверенность, how to translate it, might confidence stability. Like Prigozhin said unofficially that it is all fake, that he has no presidential ambitions, but the scale of this advertising and the scale of the repetition of these ambitions, of these rumors that he can have presidential ambitions, points out that he clearly has this sweet dream about being the head of Russia. So when now we see that the Wagnerite Telegram channels are announcing presidential ambitions of Prigozhin, we can say that the mutiny came to the next stage, and the question is how long Prigozhin can hold this position, how long he survives. I can imagine the Russian military and political leadership is staying now under temptation of air raiding their own cities and like killing Prigozhin units in some sort of an airstrike, because this is maybe the most easy part for them to weaken the Wagner troops now with a massive airstrike and to hope to kill Prigozhin. The questions, of course, will arise how good it will be for the image of Vladimir Putin if he orders bomb in Rostov. I would say there will happen nothing to his image. He ordered to bombard Grozny, which he claimed to be a Russian city because there were like bad Chechens there. He literally bombs the territories which he claims to be Russian now, like Zaporizhia, Kherson, etc., killing people who he claims to be Russian. So he will certainly find excuse to bomb Rostov, saying that, for example, only the buildings where the Wagnerite terrorists built their fortresses were destroyed and no civilian has ever been harmed. Like, that is no problem for Putin. The question is, of course, if this airstrike can be conducted effectively. And the second question is, how much support does this idea have among the military? Because, as I said earlier, Prigozhin is a person who clearly is being seen by many in the military ranks as an effective and respected commander. And I would say that many people in the army solidarize with what Prigozhin is saying, that this military operation is being ill planned, that the army doesn't get all the equipment it needs, that Shoigu is a bad leader and doesn't know what they want to achieve, that attacks in Ukraine since months are uncoordinated and don't bring any success, and that effectively the Russian army must find new ways to defeat Ukraine or to pull out of this war. This is, I would say, these five ideas are being supported by many in the Russian army who clearly see that they suffer heavy losses which they didn't expect they would suffer. So that's why I doubt that Putin can or Shoigu can find enough acceptance among the military ranks if they say, okay, like, here's the Wagner group, they're enemies, they're bad, kill them. Yeah. Yeah, like Rostov isn't Chechnya, he won't bomb it. Of course, he would not bomb it like as he bombed Grozny, like destroying the whole town to the ground. But I can easily imagine like airstrike against a facility, like where Wagner troops are sitting. I think that is why that is also one of the reasons why Prigozhin and Wagnerites did not remove military personnel from the building of the military district commander. Because Prigozhin clearly said that they have not removed anyone from the building. They have just given them orders to fight the war in Ukraine and not against Wagner. And if you now imagine that you have the whole HQ staff, military staff in that building, and you have Wagnerites, you cannot distinguish between them. You cannot discriminate. If you attack this building, you kill a lot of own people. And the Russian army is bloodthirsty, uncontrolled bunch of criminals. But I doubt many in the Russian army would be happy with the idea hitting a headquarters in Rostov with hundreds of Russian officers sitting there just because Wagner group is also there. Like, the Russian army could have hit the school in Beslan with the Ossetian kids being kept inside as hostages and ignoring the losses among the kids. But I don't think they will bomb a building with their own high-rank officers. Пыпа сделал неправильный выбор, тем хуже для него. Скоро у нас будет новый президент. That is the quote by Evgeny Prigozhin, literally translated Pripa is a derogative nickname for Vladimir Putin, playing with this P sound in his surname, and sounding a bit similar to derogative names of a male genitalia. Like he made a wrong choice that is bad for him. Soon we will have a new president. Well, that is the first. This is not the first time when Prigozhin attacks Putin directly. He already called him a delusional grandpa a couple of months ago. He also said that Putin is not in control of his own military and his own ideas. And this is just like another escalation, but the red line was crossed months before. Fair to say that Wagner role in Ukraine is over, or their coup is not effective. How much will it help Ukraine if Wagner isn't fighting them anymore? I don't think that. Okay, first, of course, it is good for Ukraine that the Russians are taking care of each other. And as the Ukrainians are joking now, we're cheering for both teams. Is the role of Wagner in Ukraine is over? As a subordinate of Russian military of defense, most probably yes. If Wagner Group will continue to fight in Ukraine, I don't see anything what could prevent them from doing that, because the Wagner Group is clearly aiming for more power, money, and influence. Now the focus of their interest is in Russia because they see a chance to seize the power or some influence. But it doesn't mean that if they succeed, they don't return partly to some regions of Ukraine where they believe they could take control of a certain certain important economic resource, or because of the positions, or I don't know. And we also may not exclude the situation that Prigozhin can be defeated. He can be killed. What will happen with his soldiers? As Wagner Group is a clearly Führer-like, leadership built unit. Without Prigozhin, it will lose its subjectivity. It will lose its way to present itself in infospace, to present itself to the Russian population. Because now Prigozhin is a name. If you kill Prigozhin, who will substitute him? It's not Dmitry Utkin, because Dmitry Utkin is not a person who is a great speaker or a public leader. And these soldiers will need to be incorporated somehow. They will definitely not all be killed or imprisoned. You cannot imprison 25,000 people or execute 25,000 people. You better use them in other military group, providing them with a chance to fight for your cause, so they can return to Ukraine in this function. So it's too easy. It's too early. Sorry, it's too early to speak what will happen out of Wagner activities, because the first thing which they need to do now, they need to gain influence, not only controlling the heart of Rostov, because in this city, in this case, they will be cornered easily and drained, and Russia can wait. They can be contained for 1 month, 2 months, and then killed one by one. They need now to expand. They need to get control over additional resources, military resources, equipment, weapons, to get more people on board, to take control over some additional regions. Like if you really plan a mutiny, to build some sort of quasi-hierarchical structures. Okay, the question is about Dmitry Utkin. Just a moment. I will send you a link. to a person, like how he looks like. Okay, he's not like a person who you would like to meet in the like in some sort of backyard or dog street. Yes, you can see the photos of Dmitry Utkin here. Dmitry Utkin, yeah, those who visited our live broadcast yesterday maybe remember that Dmitry Utkin was Russian army Spetsnaz soldier who started to be a mercenary in 1990s, and he selected his call sign Wagner because he's a neo-Nazi. He's like 100% crystal clear neo-Nazi. You can see like his tattoos here, like mocking the not mocking, like imitating the SS insignia of an SS officer with the Z runes. And he has picked this call sign Wagner because bro looks like a serial killer. He is a serial killer. Yeah, he picked the call sign Wagner because he believed that there is nothing cooler than Hitler's favorite componist. So after he was famous under the Wagner call sign, his platoon also got with this like metonymic transition of the name of the leader. His platoon started to be called the Wagner platoon or a Wagner unit. And then this group of Wagner, it was not first the PMC ЧВК Wagner, it was Группа Wagner, Wagner's group, like a much more loosey and informal constellation. And out of this Wagner group, the PMC Wagner was created because on some point of history, in like early 2010s, I think, or end of 2000s, like somewhere between 2008 2010, the Russians came to idea that they need to have a full operational military unit, fully under control of the Russian military leadership, but officially not a part of the Russian army. So they can send them where they want without announcing it, without getting any legal permission from the parliament. Okay, parliament is under control, but still you need to have the paperwork done because look, the soldiers need to get. If you send a soldier somewhere and say like you go there, you kill this guy, you seize control over that facility, the soldier needs to get a written order, even in Russia. That was, for example, the reason why many soldiers not many, but a significant number of soldiers in Russia refused to enter the war against Ukraine in February last year because they said, I don't have a written order. And the Russian army did not find a way to persuade them. The only way they found, they canceled their short-term contracts and posted a stamp in their military documentation that he is a covert and can easily tend to betrayal, which was of course like informal but unpleasant stamp in your personal documents. So any soldier needs to get a written order to go abroad and fight. And for this order, there should be an order of Ministry of Defense, and Ministry of Defense needs to get order for that from the president. The president needs to get permission from the parliament. Of course, it is all under control, and you can do it. And when Vladimir Putin needed to start his first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, the Russian parliament provided him with this formal green light within a couple of hours, but still it needs to be done. And what happens if you don't want it to be public, if you don't want it to be done? You have a Wagner group. And that's how they came to this idea, and that's how the Russian political leadership came to Yevgeny Prigozhin and said, "Look, you are a multimillionaire. You have earned a hell of a lot of money selling bad food to Russian schools because you're a good buddy of Vladimir Putin. Now it's time to pay back." and to invest your money into something what your motherland needs. And this is a private military company. That's how Prigozhin started to be head of PMC Wagner, and practically like substituted Utkin as the head of Wagner. Although Prigozhin never founded Wagner, and he was for years never in charge for Wagner. He denied it all the time. He didn't like this role. He invented himself as a warlord just a year ago when he started to film himself visiting penal colonies and recruiting inmates. Okay, we have a simple-minded thug who is way more afraid of Western armies and he knows their powers personally. Yeah, like I would partly agree and partly disagree. I would not reduce him to a simple-minded thug. He's of course a thug, and from a perspective of a cultivated, educated person, he's a simple-minded, but he's pretty good for Russia. Like he survived for a longer time and he knows how Russia functions. And I think like he is exactly as Putin. Like Putin is also not a great mind. If you observe how Putin talks to people, how he speaks, what jokes he uses, he's a very simple guy, a psychopath, a sociopath, but not an intellectual. And in the same time, he seems to be the right guy to control Russia for over 20 years. And the same is with Prigozhin. Like Prigozhin doesn't need to be like Fukuyama or I don't know, some other like Harari or other intellectual. He doesn't need to write books. It's not his job. His job is to understand how power structures work in Russia and how to manipulate people. And but of course, you're right. Here, what Imperator Somnium is writing. And by the way, greetings to Bulgaria. He knows the powers of the Western armies personally. Yes, he knows. I already mentioned the case when the Wagner battalion was eliminated in Syria. And of course, Prigozhin knows personally what HIMARS battery can do with his unit and what is a storm shadow. And he can imagine what happens when he doesn't face like 20 HIMARS along the front line of 2,000 kilometers, but a couple of battalion of HIMARS on the area of, let me say, 50 kilometers, supported by the U.S. Air Force, by all the U.S. like divisions, etc. Of course, he doesn't want to get in trouble, but he clearly has his ambition, his power ambitions. He doesn't want to be a cook anymore or a money bag for Putin. He wants more. The whole situation is sad and crazy. Must Russia be in turmoil once every generation? Well, I don't think that it is sad. It is crazy a bit. I don't think it is sad under the circumstances. It is clear something what makes a current genocidal Russian regime weaker. And when we think about the fact that the Russians have installed mines in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and were ready to blow it up, I hope a bit that this Wagner mutiny could distract them a bit from their plans and maybe help them to fight each other before like fighting the Ukrainians. Although even this night the Russians managed to strike Ukraine with missiles in Kiev. I think 2 people were killed after missile debris have fallen on a multi-stories living building, a residential building. Yes, the Russians will still wait the way to kill the Ukrainians. The whole situation is sad. Your info is very helpful. Thanks, my man. Oh, thank you for listening. Thank you for visiting this live. So I think these updates can be probably we can come to some sort of the end of this live. Let me check the news, the Russian news, the Ukrainian news. and we clearly see a development in the whole situation. Yeah, that is what I like very much. The Russian Lenta.ru state-controlled popular media post a story with the title "The head of LNR stated that the situation in the region is stable and all state authorities work according to their legal framework." When you have to say something like that, something is wrong in your region or in your institutions. Um, yeah, the Russian authorities call the Russians to demonstrate unity. Um, Putin promised to protect the country. Putin ordered the army to shoot live against Prigozhin mutiny. So this doesn't look informative. It looks like really, really crazy. Um, yeah, in Kursk and Bryansk region in Russia, they introduce additional security measures. So it goes like it bright like it widens, like it goes broader. We don't have Rostov only now. We have the development in other regions. So we have now video of a military convoy. Allegedly it can be Wagner because they have like some civilian cars there, but it is not confirmed yet. I can see here like approaching Voronezh. I can see here one rocket artillery truck. I would say it is pretty old one. It can be Grad, this 122 millimeter caliber rocket artillery, and it looks like a tank track transporting some infantry fighting vehicle. Um, Firefighting reported close to Voronezh. So if you look at the map, Voronezh is on the halfway from Rostov to Moscow, and Voronezh is just like, I would say, maybe 4 hours driving from Moscow. So it is really central Russia. Like it is really um, the central Russia. It's not some Belgorod region or Kursk region anymore. It is the region which is in central Russia and which belongs to the core of the sovereign Russian territory. Like this is not like some contested area. You cannot say, like when we were talking about Belgorod, we could say, yes, it is sovereign Russian territory. There is no doubt of it is internationally recognized Russian territory. But historically, like Belgorod was a Ukrainian territory with a lot of ethnic Ukrainians living there. And until 1920, they belonged to Ukraine and they used Ukrainian language. And if you look at the first decrees of the Belgorod Communist Republic, they were published in Ukrainian language. So of course it doesn't mean that Ukraine now like has a legal right according to international law to annex these territories if Ukraine wanted. Ukraine never wanted, but if Ukraine wanted, it doesn't have like any internationally recognized rights for that territory. But still, you can see the underlying issues there. You can see there are people who can identify themselves as Ukrainians. There are people who have their families across the border in Ukraine, etc. But Voronezh is not the case. Like Voronezh, like never belonged ethnically to Ukraine. Like there was never some Ukrainian speaking majority there. So if you have fighting around Voronezh, it is something like, I don't know, like you have fighting around Philadelphia. You cannot ignore it anymore. Okay, so what do we have further? Yes, the Wagner. It is clearly a Wagner column approaching Voronezh, and it is interesting to speculate what will happen next, because it was funny. Like 2 days ago, I saw a discussion in German Twitter on German Twitter with the statement, "Don't dream about collapse of Russia. It will never happen. Russia is a strong power." Um, okay. If I understand correctly, Bulgarian, you have itching from the news from Voronezh, if I read it correctly, but I don't speak Bulgarian, unfortunately. I can just guess, like knowing four Slavonic languages. Um, yeah, so if you have this in Voronezh, you really have like some problems which Russia didn't face, I would say, since 1920s. Like, because there have been no mutiny and no fighting in the Soviet Union. Uh, oh, it's from Todor Zhivkov. Okay, I didn't know this. I didn't know this word. So if you look back into the history of Russia and like Russian Federation, the Soviet Union, Russian Empire, you never had military fighting on ethnic Russian regions, with like real fighting, after 1920s. Of course, if you exclude the period of time during the World War II, when Russian territories, Soviet territories, were controlled by the German Nazis, and then there have been created some marionette republic, like the Lokot Republic in Bryansk region. It is like a bit north east from the Ukrainian border. The Nazis have created there a marionette Lokot Republic, which was proclaimed to be like a nationalist Russian republic in a military and political union, or like subordination to the German Reich. And they had also their own police and some sort of quasi-military, paramilitary units. But it is, of course, different situation. You didn't have any proactive armed uprising or armed mutiny in Russia since 1920s, when you really had peasant uprisings in Tambov, so-called Antonovshchina, named after the leader Antonov. And it was real trouble for the Soviets. It was that much trouble that the Russian General Tukhachevsky used toxic gases against the peasants. Like, it was like pretty crazy, because like peasants were rebelling against the allegedly regime of workers and peasants. And the Russian they controlled pretty much of the territory. Tambov is a weird province, like with a lot of forests, and you can hide pretty good. And the peasant community was strong, so they supplied the Antonov troops with food and helped them to collect information. So the Russian general Tukhachevsky didn't have any chance to suppress the rebellion, but to gas the forests, and he used gas against his own population, just to suppress the rebellion, like Saddam Hussein did later, or like Assad did later. So the Russians are pretty used to use toxic gases against rebels, but that was the last case. Or at least I don't remember anything, because all other military rebellions or military insurgency, they took place in non-Russian ethnic regions. After World War II, there had been military armed insurgency in Russia-occupied Ukraine. The Ukrainians fought with arms until 1950s, and that was so important. This fight against the Ukrainian nationalists was so important for the Soviets, that they have extended the legal status of World War II veteran to all the NKVD secret police units who participated in suppressing the local insurgency in Russia-occupied Ukraine until, if I'm not mistaken, 1955. So that's why the Russians have that many veterans of World War II who could not participate in World War II because they were kids, like 10-year-old kids. But after they went to the NKVD units and turned to be NKVD soldiers and burned down Ukrainian villages and deported Ukrainian civilians, and they got that legal status of World War II veterans. There was a military insurgency in Russia-occupied Baltic countries, in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Of course, there was a Chechen war in 1994 until early 2000s. But they all were ethnic dominated regions, non-Russian regions. And you cannot find any example of any armed insurgency in Russian dominated regions. Like, you can have rebellion of Yakuts in 1930s, I think, early 1930s, 1931, 32. It was a rebellion of Yakuts in Yakutia after the Soviets kidnapped a lot of their children and put them into closed educational facilities to separate kids from their families and to raise kids as Soviet loyal communists without their ethnic loyalty. And it led to a rebellion which lasted like about 1 year and was brutally suppressed by the NKVD, who just like destroyed these nomad, not villages, but nomad settlements of Yakuts, killing a lot of people and killing their reindeers, because they were dependent on reindeers as the source of their food and transportation. But once again, it was not a Russian rebellion or insurgency. So now we have a pretty interesting situation with Voronezh. So I'm thrilled what comes next. Okay, do we have any news? I don't know. Mm, hmm. No, like I don't see like any additional developments of the story. Like the M4 highway is closed, and Moscow airports work without any problems, they say. I wonder how long will it last, this situation. I can imagine they just close them for some security reasons. Okay. Russian media confirmed destruction of 3 helicopters by Wagner troops. Okay, that is what we knew. The report of British intelligence says that the position of Rosgvardia, like the militarized units of the Russian Interior Ministry, will be decisive for this development. This is an interesting take. In Russia, you have a very strange system of army or militarized paramilitary units. You have the Ministry of Defense, which is the Russian army, which is the Russian Navy, Russian Air Force, and Russian Land Force, and Russian, the Air Force is being called now Air Space Force because they wanted to have a fancy name, and like the Russian strategic nuclear forces. So these are like 4 main types of forces in Russian army. But you also have fully equipped with all the equipment units which are not the military of defense army. Like you have the interior troops of Ministry of Interior, and they have all equipment and had it like actually since the later Soviet time. They had fighter jets, they had artillery, they had tanks, they had their own divisions. Like close to Moscow, they were stationed all the time, like two divisions of the Ministry of Interior. The Dzerzhinsky division, for example, was the division under control of Ministry of Interior, and they were used also against Chechens in the first in the first Chechen war, and were extremely brutal. Then you have the FSB controlled military units, which also have all the equipment, including tanks and IFVs and other heavy equipment. And then you had also the armed groups, paramilitary groups of Ministry of Emergency Situations, from where Shoigu came, because the Ministry of Emergency Situations was normally a ministry which was dealing with like some catastrophes, forest fires, oil pipeline leaks, explosion of gas, etc. But then Shoigu, he wanted to be a real general. So he introduced first military uniform for his and his team, and then he created the paramilitary units of Ministry of Emergency Situations, EMERCOM, and they also got tanks and fighter jets because Shoigu wanted to have it. There were also an amazing conspiracy theory in Russia back then that actually like Shoigu is the hidden ruler of Russia because he had all his good connections to Yeltsin back then, and he provided Yeltsin in 1991 during the failed communist coup, that he provided Yeltsin with Kalashnikov assault guns as Yeltsin was protecting this parliamentary building in the center of Moscow. And that's how Prigozhin should have gained influence on Yeltsin. But okay, conspiracy theories aside, Russia had hell of a lot small armies controlled by different ministries. And this Rosgvardia is actually the development of the interior troops under control of Interior Ministry. And they have suffered tremendous losses during the first weeks of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, after Russia believed that the Ukrainian army will collapse within hours. And they sent the army columns, and behind the army columns, they were moving the columns of this Rosgvardia with trucks prepared to collect freshly arrested Ukrainians, with trucks loaded with barbed wire and with other equipment you need to arrest a lot of people and create concentration camps. So these troops have been decimated in early weeks of Ukraine, and now we Su-25 shut down over Voronezh just now. I wish them good luck and good hunt, both sides, both the Russian Air Force and the Wagnerites. But if now the Brits say that the position of Rosgvardia will be decisive, I say yes, of course. Like if Rosgvardia joins Wagner, it will be good for Wagner. But I'm not sure that Rosgvardia can really demonstrate a strong resistance to like front-proven and heavy armed Wagner groups. The only armed which can now eliminate Wagner, from my perspective, I can be wrong, is the regular army of the Russian Federation, because they have bigger numbers, they have better equipment, and they have, so to say, the legal right to do it. The question is of how supportive of this idea the officers and soldiers of the Russian army are. I can imagine that some of them would gladly join Wagner instead of protecting Minister Shoigu against Wagner and facing a perspective to being sent to Ukraine within like the next months or weeks and being killed there. They know pretty well how severe are the losses of the Russian army there. Okay, so I think Yeah, there is also a video of Wagner-controlled units using the how you call them, the Panzer S anti-air defense system entering Voronezh. So that is amazing. Like the Russians first. That explains how they shut down the jet, because you cannot normally, you can, of course, if you're lucky, but it's hard to kill a jet with a man pads. But if they had a Panzer S air defense system, it could be much more easy for them. So you see, the Wagner Group got all the equipment from the Russian army. They were inflated into a real functioning army unit, not army formation, not a heavy infantry group anymore. And now, like, Putin gets paid back. I wonder how many times Putin asked himself today the question, why haven't they killed Prigozhin back then when he was my cook? It could be fun to kill him. But now, like, he pays for his mistakes. I think we can end now. I'm really thankful that you found your time, and that you have followed this live broadcasting. I will try to come back when we have like real new information, because what we have now, like, we have discussed practically everything. Who is Prigozhin? What is Wagner? Like, what could be their plans? Who could stay behind all this development? What could be the further development? So now another jet, like, downed over another city, will not add more information. It is just tactical development. The real development could be if Wagnerites, like, okay, of course, huge news would be if Wagnerites enter Moscow. And you see, like, uh on my, like, strahlende Augen, like my eyes which are lightning. I want to see Wagnerites entering Moscow. I want to witness it. It is really interesting time to live in. And so there is like this joke that it is not good to live in interesting times, but in this case, I really enjoyed the last like several hours of development. Is exactly what any political scientist and any security expert waited for his own life. I'm so sorry that Tom Clancy has died before like this whole story unleashed. He would have enjoyed it now, and maybe write one of his books. So I think we should meet again when we have a new story. Either Wagnerites enter Moscow, or they control like some of the major cities, or some of the Russian generals swaps the side and joins the Wagner Group, or something else happens, or of course Ukrainian counteroffensive or offensive. It's actually not counteroffensive; it's offensive. If Ukrainian offensive, or when Ukrainian offensive gets momentum, and the Ukrainians will be heading towards the seashore of the Sea of Azov. Until now, stay safe. Thank you very much for having watched this live broadcast. Stay strong and stay safe, and glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.